What's going on, folks? This is Balaji, and welcome to another edition of Demand Wars. Let me set this dude up for you. All right, hold me back. All right, so he was born in Venezuela, Miami raised. On international planes, he spent most of his days building community that quickly makes dollars, relationship flowers like Pablo Gonzalez. Come on, when a couple of CFOs up to no good, they started causing trouble in his neighborhood. I could go on. Come on, folks. This dude grew up using relationship building to make friends on playgrounds from Miami to Spain. Today, he teaches companies how to grow revenue while building community, and he even demonstrates how to do it zero to community in 4 weeks with a strategy your CFO will love. Please help me welcome the fresh prince of relationship-driven growth, Pablo Gonzalez. What up, Pablo?
Balaji, I didn't even know that you got the flow. So let's go, yo. Man, I didn't know you were about to drop a rhyme on me, dude. I'm just sitting here figuring out I got to freestyle my own intro, man.
Hey, man. Hey, listen, you're the only dude that I know that raps at the beginning of his podcast. So I'm like, I got to match that energy, man. I got to match that.
I rap at the beginning of my podcast and one of my clients' podcasts as well. So I've got multiple seeds of like I want to claim the hip hop for business space.
It's pretty unique.
After I saw Common in like a Microsoft commercial, I was like, oh, okay, we've gotten this far. Okay, I want it.
It's pretty unique. It's pretty unique. Yeah. Hey, Pablo. So I discovered your content probably a couple of years ago. I was working at Bevy. We had the CMX Summit, fantastic conference. I think you're on there again this year. You always bring the heat at the CMX Summit. And I was like, man, this dude has a pretty unique approach to building community. Community is like this big buzzword in B2B. The question to you is, why do you think that community has gotten so much attention in the business to business space, particularly recently?
I've never really answered that question this way, Balaji, because for a long time I've been saying that community is the future of business development, but I no longer believe that. I think it's now, right? And I think what happened is, if you look at business for the longest time, it has been a human to human thing, right? Like the relationship has always been the atomic unit of business. And we just happened to go through a phase where technology got inserted. And when technology gets inserted into that equation, people really rapidly want to scale and want to like amplify these things that you can do. And where we go immediately is volume, right?
Yes.
And as that ages, that volume starts to contract more into like, no, what we really need is quality because volume gets too high. And now we're back in that golden age where we've gone beyond that curve to get past volume, looking for quality, and people are seeing technology as a way to increase the quality and scale relationships instead of just scaling the volume. And I think a one-to-one example is food production. And food production in the world, for our entire history of humanity, you were very attached to where your food came from, right? Then industrialization hit, and really quickly we went into volume and quantity and how much can we produce. And real quickly, not super quickly, but eventually we started realizing this is killing us. So then we started using industrialization, everything we're doing, to go back to like closer source, better ingredients, farm to table, at scale, and now Walmart sells organic ingredients. I think we're going through that same exact curve of that we went through in food production and industrialization with communication, industrialization, and now we're going back to organics.
I've never heard it explained that way either. This segment is brought to you by McDonald's.
Let me get them a chicken.
I think they just brought back the McRib or something, speaking of, taking things too far. But this is a really, really interesting point, Pablo. I came up in demand generation over the past decade and a half. I was one of the first customers of a company called Eloqua. Eloqua was a marketing automation platform. They helped us marketers to do things like lead scoring and lead nurturing. So we're doing everything at scale. It sounds like you're positing that scale isn't necessarily the bad thing, but maybe we were scaling the wrong things.
Correct. We were scaling noise when we should be scaling relationship building, and a well-formed community is relationships, healthy relationships at scale.
Okay. Okay. So you've coined this term, Pablo, relationship driven growth. Help me understand, help me unpack what that means. And I mean, it feels like a warm hug. It feels great, but it doesn't feel like it's solving my Monday morning problems as
Yeah,
you've put it, right?
yeah, yeah.
What is it? And honestly, does it help the bottom line?
Listen, relationship driven growth is an amateur category designer's like swing of a bat, right? My core thesis is what I said a little bit while earlier.
Mhm,
Relationships are the atomic unit of business,
mhm,
right? Whether whether it's your relationship with your prospect, right? The better that relationship is, the more likely they are that they're going to buy, or it's your relationship with your employees or
mhm,
your boss, the better that is, the better that your career is going to go, or the better that the company is going to do, or your relationship with the community, right? Like if you have great PR and great positive brand that everybody stands behind, your
mhm,
company does well, like Tom Shoes. If your relationship with the community is not as good as it used to because it's not fitting societal norms, then you're Victoria's Secret all of a sudden, right?
mhm,
So that to me is the crux of relationship driven growth, is this idea that we need to approach building businesses and running businesses, and the greatest businesses that we know have these elements in mind, and it's only going to get more important in the future with
mhm,
a society where information is free and everybody knows if you're a jerk, and every single time that you've been a jerk is on record, right?
mhm,
So as that continues to happen, this idea of building through genuine relationships with your market, with your clientele, and with your team is going to get more and more important. Now, your question of it not being a Monday morning problem, you're right. It's not a Monday morning problem yet, right? This is just the problem that's coming. What I see
mhm,
is in a rapidly automated world, right? Demand and supply is getting commoditized, right?
mhm,
Amazon has completely done it with physical products, in the sense that you can now get anything to show up to your house whenever you want. I believe that demand will also become commoditized as well.
hmm.
We're going to get to the point where we're wearing the Google
Oh boy.
lens, right? In some way, I'm going to
Right.
be walking down the street and I'm going to be like, man, that's a sweet shirt that Balaji's wearing. And immediately I'm going to get like ads for like shirts that look like that. Do I
Oh
want it? I'm
Lord.
going to be talking to my friend and be like, my boss was kind of a jerk to me. And immediately I'm going to get an offer of jobs that fit my profile that I'm interested in, right? Like it's already happening, man. If I say the word Punta Cana, I guarantee you I'm going to get like a all inclusive vacation being advertised to me on Facebook at some point soon because we're online right now, right?
Hmm,
So that's already happening, and it's going to continue to happen, and it's going to lead to a world where there's these big digital giants that have all the ad spend, that have all the footprint, that are going to basically take that commoditized part of the market, and then the people like us, the smaller businesses and the entrepreneurs that are doing this, are going to win based
hmm,
on the community that we have around us, right? Like this idea that we have genuine relationships with the market, that is the ultimate moat, right?
mhm,
So when I go to solve this Monday morning problem today, I'm not selling community. I'm selling better content marketing, faster pipeline, right? Like
mm,
a way to nurture your clients, a way to attract things, a way to become the center of the conversation, because that's
mm.
something that business owners go to bed thinking about at night on Sunday. They're not thinking, how can I get a community tomorrow? That's not giving them the scaries.
You know, uh, um, you mentioned, Pablo, as we were talking before the show started, that you weren't necessarily trained coming up as a classical marketer, and yet a lot of the principles that you have discovered throughout life apply to marketing, because a lot of marketing is human psychology. And you actually
Yeah.
just flipped. I said the word community, which I think a lot of marketers intuitively understand the value of. And you flipped that and you said it in a different way, that as a CFO, faster pipeline, nurturing customers. But I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, you've got my
Yeah.
attention. Why and when did you start to do that? Make that sort of switch in your language?
Right when somebody told me that community is not a Monday morning problem, and I started having to figure out a business case, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm an entrepreneur, man, and I needed to I realized that nobody was buying community, but people will buy lower cost of client acquisition and higher lifetime value and faster pipeline acceleration. So I had to come up with a product that proved that could do those things, and then started figuring out how to sell it. And that's the language that sells it, right? At the end of the day, um, what I tell people when it comes to the business case, right? At the end of the day, the economics of it is generally what gets people to move the quickest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody likes to beat their chest about the altruistic part and like the wonderful benefits of it, and that's really what I'm playing for. But if I'm going to make that impact, I need to make it real to the bottom line. And what I like to say is that all businesses are a function of cost of client acquisition plus operations has to be less than lifetime value of your client, right? And the bigger that discrepancy is between that client acquisition plus operations and lifetime value, the better that your business is going to do. And there is nothing that you can do that will lower client acquisition and increase lifetime value while keeping operational costs constant, like investing in community and investing in relationships. And because that, at the end of the day, that's word of mouth, man. That's that like invisible hand that pushes everything forward without you having to expend any extra resources.
Oh, this is good. This is good, Pablo. So you just
I'm,
took the word relationships. You're like, we're not going to say it that way. We're going to call it lower CAC, lower customer acquisition cost, higher LTV, while operation costs stay constant. Okay, this guy obviously came to win. He's playing to win, so we're gonna put him through the ringer right now. So, Pablo, with your permission, I'd like to enter you into the first question of the demand wars. My
Balaji,
friend, are
first of all, I just want to thank you for allowing me to like sound smart before I look like a complete idiot when it comes to real marketing stuff. So yes, I'm ready for this. Let's go.
you got this, Pablo. You got this.
All right.
All right, man. We're gonna jump to the first one. The first question in the demand wars is called Desert Island Marketer. Pablo, you have got a budget of $1,000 a month. That's it. You're on a desert island, and your CFO says, "Let's go to market." How are you going to do it?
I'm gonna spend $1,000 a month on the most talented overseas talent that I can find. That is a great creative, right? That can do some graphic design, that can do great editing, great video editing, and is a wizard at that type of stuff. And then I'm just gonna get out there and I am going to build as many relationships as I can while making content about it in the most strategic way possible, right? Positioning a way where I can be building a relationship with somebody strategically one on one in front of people, one to few, and then repurposing that content, giving that to my all-star outsourced talent so that he or she can be turning that into one to many content and make every single interaction that I create into as many pieces of usable content as possible that I can then strategically deploy across organic channels, across the contacts that I already know, and be able to continue to increase that word of mouth, man. That is the thing that I've been living and dying by, is this idea that everybody, because they have access to Zoom, can create a internet talk show of sorts. And that internet talk show allows you to spend 1 hour building relationships at scale every single week, and then the rest of the week figuring out how to use all the stuff that you're creating to convince other people that your product is the right thing.
Mm, mm. You know, I haven't heard people, Pablo, use the term internet talk show before. And that seems to be one of the core tenets of what you teach at Be the Stage. What's the difference between an internet talk show and a podcast or a
Yeah.
webinar?
Yeah, the feedback loop, the speed of the feedback loop, man.
Mm.
So I'm sorry, internet talk show or webinar or podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that an internet talk show is a podcast and webinar at once. And the difference is between a podcast and the internet talk show is the ability to build the relationships. It's proximity to your client when you're doing it, right? In a podcast, I'm able to build a relationship one-to-one with somebody. And then I'm able to push it out one to many via the podcast RSS feed and make it into YouTube or whatever. But that can be really, really frustrating because you're gonna spend a lot of effort to throw out all this noise into the ecosystem, hoping to hear back an echo at some point, right? And then you're gonna follow that echo to wherever you go. If you turn it into a live internet talk show where you're inviting the audience in to be a part of it, now you also have that middle ground of building relationships one to few, to the people that show up. So number one, let's say it's just me and you right now. If 3 people showed up to listen to me yabber on, you
Right.
just 4x'd your relationship building time, like one-on-one with these people, right? Like 3 extra people apart from me would be sitting here thinking about how cool you are and be able to interact with you and get that validated.
Mm-hmm.
2, it increases the speed of the feedback loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to make these like next 12 podcasts and I'm going to go produce them and I'm going to release them over the next 12 weeks, you're thinking next week, I got this one show. What is the headline? What is the description that's going to get people to the show?
Mm-hmm.
And immediately you're going to have feedback on how many people come, telling you that you know your client or you don't know your client. You know what's important. Like, did they take an hour out of their day to like
Right.
show up and learn about this?
Right.
That's feedback.
Right.
Then during the conversation, whatever questions they ask, that's feedback. How are they misunderstanding or how are they correctly understanding? You start to really understand their language. That's huge. And then third and final is if you start getting a following, if you start getting people that show up every single week and they turn into a little community, then Eddie Yoon says this really well. He wrote the book Super Consumers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no more powerful persuasion technique or client acquisition technique than 2 of your super consumers talking about you in front of somebody that's deciding whether or not they want to do business with you.
Oh, come on.
Right? So like if you start having like 5 or 10 or 15 people that show up every week, that 6th person or that 11th person or that 16th person that shows up and it's like, oh, Balaji's for real. Right? So like immediately there's like, oh, there's people here that aren't me, right? Like you trigger that like that lever of influence of liking
Right.
and wanting to go along with the crowd. That
Right.
works. As far as a webinar, nobody wants to go to a webinar, dude. So why not call it an internet talk show? and and now, it's very different if I invite you to my like series of webinars
Yep.
versus I invite you to my internet talk show. You're much more likely to come want to be a part of it because it doesn't sound like you're going to be a corporate shill for me. And the audience is much more likely to come want to be a part of it because it doesn't sound like they're going to get sold to. It sounds like they're going to get educated, entertained, and inspired, and whatever that means. So
Right.
making it a show makes your webinar a very, very useful tool. And every once in a while, when you're doing these shows weekly or every other week or monthly, you can throw a right hook out there and make it a straight up webinar, but it's still branded as a show and people are still going to show up and you're still going to get that validation. Like webinars don't get communities that form around them, right? Like webinars don't get those like 10 people that show up to every single one of them so that they convince the next person for you.
Right.
So I feel like I just spoke a lot, but that's the difference, right? Like the proximity to the audience makes for the feedback loop to be way better, and it makes your relationship building much more rapid. And then the positioning of show versus webinar just makes it way cooler.
Now, this is really powerful, and you've talked often about maybe the 4 dimensions of relationship building through an internet talk show. I may have phrased that improperly, but I think that is a massive difference between a webinar, which often is a PowerPoint or Google slide deck. It's one voice talking for 60 minutes, maybe 5 minutes Q&A. What are those 4 dimensions of relationship or connection that you facilitate in an internet talk show?
Balaji, first of all, man, like the fact that somebody as brilliant as you pays attention to anything I'm saying is incredible. So thank you for this
Your stuff
amazing
is good, bro.
Thank you for this validation, man. Yeah, I call it the 4 vectors of relationship building that happens, right? So when you are hosting one of these shows, you're able to build a relationship one-to-one with the guest, right? Like the first vector is the guest.
Yeah.
I like to refer to content co-creation as the new golf, man. Like we can go out there and spend 4 times on a range together, or we can like get up on a stage and like hype up a crowd, or I can interview you about like why you're so awesome, and that's going to drive a bond between us, right? The next one is host to the audience, right? When the audience shows up, you're able to build a relationship with those folks by speaking directly to them, incorporating them into the conversation, doing those things. Then the third vector, and most people get those first 2 pretty intuitively. The third vector is guest to audience, right? So phrasing the interactions, right? Like once you're getting the audience to start really feeling they're a part of it, and they're brave enough to like want to interact with the guest,
Mm-hmm.
you phrase the questions and the things that they say as like a warm introduction to the guest.
Mm-hmm.
That creates, more of a bond between them. It makes the audience member feel valued and seen, and they get to be a part of the stage. And at the end of the day, it helps the guest. Anytime you're adding context to the question that the guest is getting, you're helping the guest give a better answer.
True.
Right. So you're setting them up to win, and you're feeling like you're connecting them to each other. And then the fourth vector is the audience to audience. That's that
Yep.
community vector, right? That is how can you get the people that show up on a Zoom chat every single week to start being friends offline, right? Like how do you get them to have like a bond with each other? And if you're doing it correctly and you are sharing the stage appropriately and acknowledging people in the chat, that starts to happen naturally because they all, it's like being part of a parish, man. Like you go to church to listen to the priest, but you're meeting the people in the you're meeting the people in the pews as well. And at the end of the day, that is a very, very old business model based on community creation as well.
How about
right?
that? That's a great analogy. That's a good analogy. Okay, I appreciate that. You laid that out really, really well. That's the challenge if we have very, very limited budget to create demand. The next challenge for you, Pablo, is 3, 3, and 3. So we've been asked to create demand, Pablo, but they want it fast. So we're going to have you answer this question 3 different ways. First, if you only had 3 days to create demand. Second, if you had 3 weeks. And third, if you actually had a quarter, 3 months. So let's start with the 3-day scenario. It's an emergency. We're about to miss the Q4 pipeline goal. CFO says you got 3 days to work magic. What are you going to do?
In this scenario, have I been executing an online talk show? Yeah, here's what I'll tell you, man.
Interesting.
If I have 3 days, if I have 3 days, Balaji, I would execute a version of this that makes it like a special edition online panel about a subject that I really, really care about inside a vertical that I really, really care about that I want to get to know. Right. So we had a client that went through this. They were going through funding. They were coming short on their funding and they needed to create demand immediately. They had an online talk show, right? So it makes it easier if you already have the online talk show, because then you have the platform to be like, this is a special edition of the show, not just a clear money grab, right? But they were an online educational platform, and they realized that their 3 verticals that really hit were coding, chess, and languages, right? So what do? We reached out. We spent a day researching who were the top minds in that world, invited them on to a special edition of panel of how to grow the best businesses. The best chess educators, come learn from them, right? And we hosted a panel with the 3 highest level people that we could get to ask them about their business and how they're running it, while inviting everybody on the list from the chess world to be a part of it, right? Kind of like a special panel at a trade show or at a conference or anything like that. That allowed the founder to build relationships with his like 6 dream clients, right? Because like 6 people said yes, and then we ended up picking 3, while deploying to this list of completely like inviting everybody in the world that would want to come listen to these people and come be a part of it, right? So it became it's again like it's like the shortened version of a virtual summit, which I think if you were to tell me, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself, right? But like that idea of like, go share the stage with the 3 highest level people you can, be the moderator, invite all the other people that want to be like them, that are all people you want to do business with, and make like a splash virtual event. That would be my move.
One thing that strikes me here, Pablo, as you answer that question, is the fact that if we haven't dug our well before we're thirsty, all this stuff gets harder. And so the fact that a lot of marketers are worked so close to max on, sort of going out to hunt and kill for that day, they almost don't have energy or time or creativity to plant the seeds that, hey, there's a famine coming down the road in 3 months or 6 months. And if you plant those seeds now, that's what's going to feed you then. So it really strikes me as you're sharing that some of us might not already have an online talk show or have some asset we can leverage. Maybe we should start building one.
Yeah, man. when you say that, I immediately think of like the value of having a network,
Mm.
right? Like
Mm.
to me, the community, the network, it really is the ultimate moat for hard times, man. Like if you have people in your corner, the more people in your corner that you have across the most, you know, places, the better you're gonna be, right? So I completely agree from that on a personal level, and I completely agree about that on a business level as well. Um, the more that you're able to do that, the better. There was another place that I was going to go because I was thinking of network and then something else, lost it. No big deal. But yeah, it's not even a stage. Having
Yeah.
a stage,
Yeah.
right? Like if you have a stage to offer someone,
Mm.
it is the ultimate tool for relationship building,
Mm.
right? Like you can't. I learned this early on when I started volunteering for Habitat for Humanity because they wanted to create a young professionals group in Miami. And we went out and recruited these young professionals. And immediately we started saying, like the deal was we would host like a happy hour event or something like that once a month, or like a volunteer event, or something once a month. And we would meet once a month to plan this stuff. And what we would do to meet was we would meet in the boardroom of somebody that's on the board of directors for Habitat. And that person would show up and tell us, kind of how they got to be who they are for
Right.
like 20 minutes. We'd ask them a couple questions and then we'd go plan our thing.
Mm.
Right. And that became like the first version of this for me on a personal level because I
Mm.
started getting really connected to the most influential people in your town are on the boards of nonprofits, right? Like I replicated this thing across multiple nonprofits,
Mm.
and I started realizing that, man, all I need is 10 kind of hungry young professionals that care about something other than themselves to get a meeting with like the superintendent of schools of Miami
Hmm.
or the CEO of Ryder Corporation, right?
Wow.
So that became a stage for me, right? Like I was like, hey, it's not like let me go get coffee with you. I was like, hey, I just want you to come speak to my like 10
Right.
young professionals here while we plan the next volunteer event for a charity.
How
You're
about
you're a,
that?
you're winning all the way around, right? And then I just started leveraging that to create events for these charities, to meet
Mm.
people that weren't on the boards of directors, and eventually I started leveraging that to create events for the business that I worked in, for me to become a business developer, because I realized that if you're approaching from like I don't like if you're not asking someone for their attention, but instead you're offering them the attention of other people,
Hmm.
that is a way to get in front of just about anybody. And I call that building out a stage for yourself.
I love that. I love that. We're definitely going to circle back to that one. Okay, so Pablo, let's answer that same question. Now you've got 3 weeks. Instead of running around
Yeah,
like a chicken with the head cut off, you've got almost a month to create this demand. How are you
yeah.
doing it in this scenario?
I would just do it bigger, man. I'd call it a virtual summit, right? Like
Mm.
if you got 3 weeks, then you can recruit 12, 20, whatever. Go get the top thought leaders of your industry for like an all day event where you're just going to spend it interviewing all these people about, basically like what what they care about the most in this space, how they figured out that that was an issue, what they've learned ever since, and oh by the way, how does it relate to the problem that we solve within the
Mhm.
space? And just have that conversation over and over and over again for like 2 3 days with as many really great intelligent people as you can, in a virtual summit style environment where again it's basically just an internet talk show for 3 days or two
Right.
days or one full day,
Right.
and then leverage all that content in order to generate the demand that you need to generate.
Mm, that's great. All right. And so finally, you've got a whole quarter now, 3 months.
Yeah.
What are you doing in addition to or instead of the virtual summit?
I'm finding the number one event in the industry and go setting that thing up live, right? Like figure out how you pull off a lightning strike inside this
Mm.
conference. So we've done this before. We take somebody's trade show booth and we create so we did this at HIMSS. It's like a healthcare IT conference, right? And
Mm.
we created the thought leaders of HIMSS pop-up podcast at somebody's trade show booth. And
Wow.
now everybody in the house, number one, they're walking past the trade show booth instead of like being like, what's the pencil I getting? They're looking and they're seeing lights, cameras, and mics, and they're like, who's on TV? Who do I want to meet?
Wow.
Everybody on their like sales team is like, oh, that's really interesting what you just said. You want to come be on the thought leaders of HIMSS podcast? They come back, they get this like great experience talking to the CEO or the CMO, and then they're following up with all these people with the content that they created of now we're going to go release this thing. We on the back end also have a team in the Philippines that is taking that like 12, 15-minute interview and creating a sizzle reel overnight. So now the salesperson that brought them in is gifting them this like 1.5-minute video that they can go post on LinkedIn and show all their friends that they were a speaker or a thought leader at this conference.
Get out
and
of
you're winning the
here.
conference in person and online. And then the follow-up mechanism is not like, hey, I just scanned your badge, let's get on a call. The follow-up mechanism is like, hey, we're going to post this on the YouTube channel. Let's get on a call and just make sure that we're representing you correctly. And oh, by the way, this is what we do.
Oh, come on, Pablo. Come on, Pablo. Can we stop? Can we stop right now? Can I go do that one? What? That's so
Yeah, bro.
simple though, but it appeals from a human psychology level. We've made, as marketers,
Yeah.
we've made fun of ourselves for years about this whole badge scanning approach. Hey, let me give you some free stuff for your kid. Let me just scan your badge. Psych. Now I'm going to give your email to my SDRs, and they're going to call you ad nauseum.
Gross. Yeah,
You're
it's
saying the
tough.
follow up, not only is the follow up there, that individual is actually going to relish and look forward to that
Mhm.
follow up because you just made them look great.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. They're going to look forward to it. And, not to toot my own horn, but don't forget the idea that you're winning the conference in person and online while you're at the conference, right? Because people are posting their clip of the thing and tagging the conference as the one thing that they did at the conference.
Wow.
Right. So like you just crush it.
Now, Pablo, let me ask for the folks that are listening, because they'll want this clarification. Are you generally buying or renting your own booth, or are you parking in somebody else's booth and sort of collaborating? How does that work?
I offer this as a service, and I've done this myself with a booth, right? So like if you have a trade, and I've done it for the trade show themselves as well, right? So if you have booth space, do it in the booth, right? It is way less of a fishbowl than whatever other stupid idea you had that's going to get them to engage. But if you don't want to spend the money on the booth, right? So I'm in Vegas right now for this trade show.
Right.
What I did last time I was here, I told my client not to get a booth. The money that they would have spent on a booth, they spent on booking the penthouse of the Cosmopolitan Hotel.
Ooh.
And instead, we created we found Amanda Holmes, the author of The Ultimate Sales Machine New Edition. We brought her in to give a presentation to like their 25 highest level prospects that they could find at the conference. And now it becomes VIP night in the penthouse suite.
Wow.
And what we do is we get the speaker to give the presentation, but I prepared her early on to say, part of your presentation, I want you to have a moment where everybody goes around the room giving their best piece of advice that has to do with the thing that you're talking about. Because then we did it again. We post-edited that content to make it look like she was giving a piece and then that person was giving a piece. And we gave it to them as a gift, making it look like they were both, they were at this VIP event and they were a speaker.
Dang.
Right. So you can do this. You can do this in the trade show, but you can also, do it. You can do it a bunch of different ways, right?
Oh my! Hey, listen, 2023 marketing plan. Y'all better have this line item, or better yet, call Pablo, because he'll make sure you do it right. This is brilliant. Okay, Pablo. I told you Pablo wants to win, man. This dude is just straight competitive. All right, Pablo. We're gonna flip to the next question in Demand Wars. It's this concept of marketing like a media company, or if we phrase it a different way, software companies or product companies or even service companies thinking of their content now as a product. What could that look like in 2023? How should companies be dipping their toe in the water in terms of marketing like a media company?
Apart from having a online talk show that becomes the water cooler of your industry, right? I think we've beaten that horse down pretty good. I'm really hot on the online cohort class as a media product, man. Like if we're talking about it as a product, right?
Yeah.
Like this idea that whether it is if you have a super talented staff in whatever department that corresponds to what your client is doing, getting all your best knowledge and all the best things that you do in-house and teaching them to your clientele in a 4 to 6 week experience where 10, 20, or 50 of your clientele are going through this thing together, and then forming a little mini community, because you bond with people when you're kind of like trying to solve the same problem and going through the same hardship and figuring the same thing out over time.
Yeah.
Like, and then taking that content and making that content the product of either lead magnet for online, like asynchronous online class, or if we want to call it a product, you can fundraise with it, right? Like you can sell that experience as a way to capture clients. Like if you have this happens for me, right? Like I have a $75,000 ACV. So I sell how you do this on your own as my online bootcamp that I sell, that generates revenue for me, also creates clients that are like, oh, okay, yeah, you're smart enough. Like you do this now. I want you to do this for me. But that works for me because it's one-to-one, like my service and what I offer, not necessarily always going to work. Another way that you can really do this is go to, like let's say you're a software product and you are selling, I don't know, infection control, like artificial intelligence, right? Like you don't have the skill set in house to help infection control preventionists
Right.
do it. But what you can do is go get your 15 highest profile clients and create and offer to film them creating the online course of this is how we do it at my hospital, and this is how you build a team, and this is how you execute this program correctly, leveraging technology, right? Like we did this for the first time at an e-commerce company that I was a part of, where we took our 12 highest level clients. We were an Amazon selling software. We took them all on this like retreat to Panama for an experience. And in that experience, I gave them all a template to present how they run their business. So like we can kind of like one-to-one compare how everybody's doing
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
differently across different kind of like things of the business.
Yeah.
And we realized each of them were really good at this one thing within it. So then we took that one thing that each of them did, and we created the online class about the one thing that that Marilyn was doing, and the one which may have been hiring VAs, the one thing that Emmanuel was doing, which was maybe marketing, the one thing that Vlad was doing, which was processes, right? And making that a content product as a class, right? So like highlighting your clients as the experts inside your online class as a product is absolutely something that you can do, and that creates this like bond with them as well. You also can then provide that online cohort experience, and then you can take it a step further, and 6 months later have an in-person event where you bring them in to speak so that people can come meet them and do whatever, right? So it's like one giant content motion, but that's kind of what media companies do, right? Like like the Hustle had HustleCon and the newsletter. So people are paying to go be around the people that consume the same media that they did
Right.
from the people that they were highlighting in the media, right? So it becomes a whole journey of like, you forge these very, very high level relationships in the co-creation of it. Then you're forging these other relationships in the distribution of it, and then you bring it all together in person through events.
That is sweet, man. I really like that model a lot. I want to transition, Pablo, because this is really relevant, and I want to try to get you out of here on time.
Mhm.
I want to transition to the next question, which is the sunken place. We've coined this
Mhm.
because it's this place that a lot of B2B marketers find themselves stuck in, Pablo, where they want to do demand creation, they want to do the relationship building, the provision of value, um, but they've got those Monday morning problems. They've got to hit their quota. They've got to hit the pipeline goals for the week, for the month, for the quarter. How can marketers build programs that allow them to transition? Because when you build these relationship building programs, they don't necessarily bring money in right away. Or do they? Is there a way for marketers to basically have their cake and eat it too?
Yeah, I think at the core of everything that I'm doing is the idea that you need to build this like long-term strategy of creating community and creating all this like long tail content and a platform or whatever. But the only way that you're going to feed the Monday morning problem is if you're doing it by spending time with the people that you actually want to sell to in order to
Hmm.
make this stuff happen, right? So if you have a target, you know let's call it a dream 100, right? Or like, let's call it a dream 20, right? Like you got to target 20 accounts that you really want to get with, and you really want to build a community. Figure out how to build a community where those people are the heroes of the community,
Mm,
right? So like create some kind of interaction where you're going to spend more time with that group of people,
yeah.
and that group of people are going to like you more because they're spending more time with you, and they're going to give you all the qualitative insights that you need to sell to them better, and then they're also going to give you the content that you need to create all this like long-term stuff that happens that needs to compound over time.
Yeah, that's good. Pablo, when you gave your talk, I think it was at CMX Summit, and you talked about going from zero to community in 4 weeks in a profitable fashion. What's the
Yeah,
framework behind that? How is it possible, one, to grow a community that fast, and then two,
yeah.
to actually make money while you're doing it?
The online cohort class, man.
Mm,
Right? Like to me, it was my formula for creating community has always been this like what I call a relationship flywheel, which is leveraging a stage to create these one-on-one relationships in front of the one to few relationships and repurpose one to many. That takes time. But if you kick that thing off with an online cohort class of the people that you want to do most business with, teaching it to other people, then you, in the 4 weeks of creating that class, you form a mini community. That's the basis of, that's the starting point, right? Like you've been part of the community for so long. It's impossible to be Superman to create a community. You got to create the Avengers, right? So like by creating the online cohort class, that is your first like assemblage of the
mm.
Avengers. That's a little community by itself, and that little community leads to the bigger community. One of the biggest aha moments we got in our first big case study was that we created $40 million of revenue from this one channel of this online talk show that led to community. And when we looked back after year one, most of that revenue came from one degree of separation from these about 30 people,
Oh,
right,
wow.
who were our Avengers. So
Wow.
then so then the trick becomes, how do you get those 30 people enrolled on day one instead of like 6 months to build that 30 people?
Mm.
And then the online cohort class became that, right? Became, how do we either partner with them to create the class, or they're the clients of the class immediately, but that becomes the nucleus of the community that actually makes the bigger thing go and build sustainably and profitably.
Oof, we are gonna have to end it on that point. You can't be Superman to create a community. Not even Superman could create a community. He had to recruit, I guess in his case, the Justice League, but the Avengers, I think, is maybe a bit more recent in reference to a lot of people. I love that line. We're gonna close on that. Pablo, you absolutely killed it. We're gonna have to bring you back because I think there's a lot more that we need to unpack with your approach. Dude, thank you.
Balaji, man, this was awesome. I really appreciate you sharing your stage with me, man. I am honored by the fact that you're paying attention to anything I'm saying, and I genuinely want to be your friend. I think you're a super cool dude, man. Thank you.
Folks, you've been listening to Pablo Gonzalez. You can find him at bethestage.live. And tune in because he has shows every week that you don't want to miss, especially as we're going into a new year. This is stuff you want to incorporate if you're going to hit those demand gen goals that you have. This has been Demand Wars with Balaji O, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.